Welcome to Energy Unplugged, the go-to podcast focusing on the global energy transition. My name is Hans Koenig, and I'm Aurora's Managing Director for Central Europe. Our guest today is Benjamin, or Benny Merle. Benny is the Chief Product Officer at Enpal, a leading German installer of rooftop solar, home batteries, and heat pumps, as well as the country's first green unicorn. And today is also a particular pleasure for me on a personal level because Benny has been a friend since student days and was actually the person who got me involved in Aurora in the first place. Because before joining Enpal, Benny co-founded Aurora's Berlin office along with myself and Manuel Köhler, who's now the managing director for EMEA at Aurora. That makes Benny the second Aurora alum we have on the pod since Johanna Schiele earlier this year. And that is a great pleasure. And thank you for coming back, Benny.
Hi, Hans. Yeah, happy to be here.
Great to have you. So to kick us off, in your own words, can you describe to us and to our international listeners what Enpal does?
Yes, sure. So at Enpal, we're reducing the total energy costs of our consumers, which are mainly single-family homes in Germany at the moment, while making them independent of fossil fuels and also independent of large energy companies, which is more a side topic, but for many people actually quite important. And we're doing this by offering a fully electrified solution for energy around the home. So we believe in electrification of heating via heat pumps. We believe in electrification of transport via electric vehicles. And we're offering solar, batteries, charge points, and an own home energy management system to connect everything within the house, but also, and I think we'll talk a little bit about this later, connect this to the energy market.
Super interesting. And within that, you are the Chief Product Officer. What does that mean, and what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. It can mean many things. Within Enpal, it means I'm trying to be the bracket around all our consumer-facing products. So if you look a little bit deeper, we have very different hardware, software, service, and financing solutions bundled into one single product, right? So the customer comes to us and we give them advice. We offer them solar panels, batteries, charger, maybe a heat pump. We do this with a financing solution. So that's very unique with our offer. It's our own financing solution because we firmly believe that you can only reach the masses if you offer them a convenient long-term financing solution for this. But our product also includes software, right? We have an own app, we have an own energy management system, and we have energy services, electricity tariff, we have an own metering company, and we're working on a virtual power plant. So I'm trying to be the bracket around all these things, trying to get them to market, responsible for commercial success of those. And yeah, hopefully we develop the right products.
Well, I guess success is probably proving you right, and that actually is a perfect segue into talking about the German rooftop solar market a bit, because I think it's fair to say it's been a very challenging year and a half we've just had after a very significant or massive boom during the energy crisis, where really everything went through the roof. We've seen quite a few bankruptcies and players leaving the market recently. How is Enpal doing in that environment?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the classic solar coaster that one can read about. I think, I mean, if you look at the last 5 years that I've been with Enpal, I think the first year was really very much influenced by COVID and two things. First of all, how do you install an environment where people don't want to meet each other and don't want to let you into their house? That was one very practical problem. And secondly, global supply chain crunch. We were in a very, very good position to actually profit from COVID, I think partially because Mario Köhler, the main founder of Enpal, has a tendency sort of to overreact to crisis. Yeah. And he was talking about COVID long before everyone was talking about it. And so we did a not very intuitive move. When COVID started, we moved to China. We opened up an office in China. We found someone in China and we started managing our supply chains from China to Europe ourselves. And that helped us really not being supply constrained in a very tough time.
So this was all in the first couple of months of 2020, before the lockdowns came in Europe.
That's right. We opened the office in beginning of May that year.
Oh, wow. So when Europe was locked down, but China was isolated but still open, kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and we found a German guy, Henning, who has lived there for 10 years, and basically he set up everything and built the relationships and managed the supply chains. Yeah. I think then the next phase that came was obviously the war in Ukraine and the gas crisis, and that was very good for solar, yeah, even though it was obviously not good for the world. But clearly, when the market went up, it was obvious to see that this was not a sustainable level. Still, everyone built up capacity, right? Everyone started installing solar panels. Every mom and pop shop did 10, 20 new startups, a lot of money put into the market. And then when power prices normalized and interest rates went up, we saw sort of the bloodbath that we've seen the last 12, 15 months, where really, unfortunately, some very good companies like Solar and others have left the market or have gone bankrupt. I think Enpal managed to get through it quite well with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I think one of the real advantages here for us is that we are running a deeply integrated model. Yeah, so almost everything along the value chain we do ourselves, from marketing to sales to supply chain from China to installation with own installation teams, with own academies, through financing with own financing vehicles, through tech development, and having this control over the entire system during such a challenging time where you have to maybe adapt capacity very quickly, where you have to adapt offerings very quickly, I think was one of the key advantages that helped us get through the time.
Makes a lot of sense. And that actually already partly answers the next question I would have had, which is where you see your edge over other players in this market, especially the smaller installers. But maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe for the listeners, a little bit about the market. So I think in the very early days in Germany, sort of after the introduction of the EEG in the late 90s, beginning of 2000, solar rooftop became a thing.
Sorry to interrupt. The EEG being the German Renewables Act, which is kind of like determining how all the subsidies work and so forth.
Yes, that's right. In this first phase, it was all about feed-in, right? There were very high feed-in tariffs. Self-consumption wasn't really a thing. Batteries weren't really a thing. So it was all about feed-in. It was partially a green, but mainly an investment vehicle for people who had 20, 30,000 euros and got a nice return from government. Then there was a second phase, sort of 2008, 2009, 2010, when all of a sudden self-consumption became a thing because battery prices have fallen and energy price in Germany had risen quite a lot, partially also because of the way the feed-in tariff and the EEG works in Germany, right? It was levied onto end consumer prices, so household prices rose a lot. And now in the third phase, where we're in and where we're also developing our products, in the third phase, we have three interesting trends coming together. The first trend is what we call in German sector coupling. So it's the full electrification of heating, transport, and so on. The second trend is digitization, and Germany was and still is way behind in terms of digitization everywhere, but in particular in the energy sector. So the smart meter rollout is somewhere at 1% or 2%. I don't know the exact number, but the smart meter rollout is nowhere. And we have 800-900 DSOs in Germany. If you ask them for a smart meter, it can be anything between 2 weeks and 6 months. But yes, this is coming. So digitization is coming, and the third one is volatility has risen a lot in the electricity sector, in particular in the continuous intraday markets. Volatility has risen a lot, and out of trends, we're trying to develop products where customers can fully switch to an electric world, and use a home energy management system to make the best out of the volatility. And to come back to your question, currently the market is sort of split in three kind of players. The one is a mom and pop shop. The mom and pop shops are great if it comes to lean customer acquisition costs because they build for their neighbors, but they are stuck with very low tech solutions. Yeah, they're not developing any solutions. Obviously, they also don't have financing solutions. They don't have insurance solutions. They're sort of stuck with very low tech solutions.
They're basically plugging together what you can buy wholesale and installing that.
Exactly. And given that the standards in the hardware, or given that there's no clear standard for hardware interaction with other hardware, you can't just buy a heat pump, a solar system, a charger, and all of a sudden things work together, in particular not with a smart meter, in particular not with an energy tariff and so on. Yeah. So they are stuck. They have quite a good competitive edge in terms of costs on customer acquisition, but they're stuck in a very low-tech world. Then there is the very large utilities like E.ON and so on who are trying to get into the market, but they have done this for quite a while. And for example, EWE has left the market already. E.ON is trying it now again with acquisitions. They have bought Clasola, a medium-sized company. EnBW bought a few companies. Most of them are bankrupt again. So it seems to be very difficult for such a large old organization to execute this model. Yeah. And then there is a few scale-ups like Enpal, yeah, mainly 1,5 and maybe 2 or 3 smaller ones that are driving the market.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that explanation. So really, it's the complexity and it's the fact that you can no longer, or many customers can no longer think about just about solar and isolation, but also the heat pump, also the electric vehicle, the home storage, the co-optimization of all of that, where your solutions start adding a lot of value. And that's of course not just a trend that's happening in Germany, but also across Europe and the world. And I think you recently launched a business in Italy. Do you have any further plans for international expansion?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen ourselves always as an international company. So the vision is to be not only within Europe, but also a global player. To be honest, we saw a lot of growth potential within Germany the last couple of years. For example, the heat pump business, which is only sort of 2 years old. And as a scale-up, I think Mario always says you're more likely to drown because of too many opportunities than to die of thirst of having too few opportunities. So I think there's a story around focus here. But we'll definitely enter, let's say, 2 to 3 more markets in Europe over the next 2 years. Yeah, and then there's some interesting international markets, right? Australia is something that always comes up. US is something that always comes up. Japan is interesting, but we'll see how this goes.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. And then also to double click on one thing which you said about having your own supply chain, because I can totally see how that was a big advantage during a global supply chain crunch and being able to, or being the only ones to be able to get panels from China and so forth. Of course, now we're in a very different geopolitical environment where tensions are much higher and where having a very strong supply chain in China may no longer be considered a good thing in Europe, of course, not even talking about the US. How are you guys thinking about that?
Yeah, that's true. It's a big topic that we get asked about a lot also from investors. I think the first thing that we all need to realize is that even the European inverters, even the European heat pumps have a lot of Chinese material, Chinese technology within them. Yeah? So for example, for heat pump, we're working with Bosch, which is a German company, obviously, and they're producing in Europe, but even they have elements in there that are coming from China and that might not so easily be replaceable with other pieces. So I think if we talk about supply chain security, entanglement, you really need to go very deep to see where the chips or the original material or so on comes from. Having said that, we're working on diversifying across all our A components. So for example, modules nowadays you can also get from India. Yeah. You can also find solutions together with Chinese companies to manufacture fully outside of China. Yeah. So for example, Vietnam is a great place to do that. So yeah, it's a big topic for us, and we're driving a strategy here where we see China as an extremely strong and reliable partner, but even together with them, we need to find solutions for any geopolitical tensions that might also be out of our control.
Great, thanks a lot. I'd now like to dive a little deeper on the topic of flexibility, where you built Enpal's offering on flexibility, aggregation, marketing, and also your joint venture with Entrix, which is a German battery trading company, which, just as a side note, we've already had on the pod. If you missed that episode, I would encourage you to listen into episode 207, where my colleague Ted Kreisig talks flex trading together with Entrix founder and CEO Steffen Schürzian, but that's just a side note. Can you talk to us about what you're doing with your virtual power plant, or even what you understand by virtual power plant? Because there's a lot of definitions floating around.
Yeah, 100%. Virtual power plant is a horrible buzzword, actually. I've always tried to introduce a new word within our company, but nothing really was sticky enough. So, I mean, if we think back of what I said a few moments ago of the different phases of the solar rooftop market in Germany, right? Even in that second phase where it was all about self-consumption, which is mainly the phase most of the market is still in, solar and batteries are not helping the grid, right? They're part of the problem, actually, right? Because it's easy to understand if a battery only optimizes for self-consumption, it means it starts charging in the morning, right? It's typically full by 11 o'clock, so even before noon, and then you offload all the solar electricity into the grid. And Germany is not a huge country. This is happening all at once, mainly all across Germany. So we believe this can be done differently. So what we're doing is we first instant integrate all important pieces locally into our IoT platform. Yeah. So this is mainly the heat pump, the battery, the charger. It could theoretically in the future also include other smaller demand sources.
So that's the washing machines, or what do you have in mind there?
That could be the washing machine. Yeah, I don't really believe in that case. Yeah, but maybe there are some customers who have, I don't know, 5 fridges or whatever. Yeah, pool pumps is, for example, one topic. Pool pumps quite large. Heating rods is a topic. Yeah, some people have heating rods. So there's some funky stuff out there, but it's mainly the things we talked about. And then we have built within that joint venture a aggregation platform that is basically a machine learning layer that forecasts the individual and aggregated state of all our houses. So it's basically forecasting for the next quarter hour and for the next day and maybe for the next couple of days, what's the flexibility corridor, given also everything the algorithm learned about how that network behaves, right? Because it's hard to forecast when Mr. Müller is unplugging his car. It's hard to forecast when an internet line is failing, and so on and so on. Yes, that's what machine learning is a great tool for. And then we're using this flexibility corridor and Entrix trading algorithms to trade this flexibility on the market. And I think what's special about that B2C VPP we're building here is that most companies that are active in this space in Germany at the moment are talking about so-called optimization against dynamic energy tariffs. So dynamic energy tariffs is a little bit the new thing in Germany. Some markets are already further, but because Germany is so behind on smart meters, it's coming up now. But dynamic energy tariffs are based on the day-ahead market, right? The day-ahead market has very, very little volatility. So basically what I'm saying is I'm giving you, Hans, now a dynamic energy tariff, and now we can shift a little bit from the afternoon to the night and from the morning to midday. but the delta, you know it better than I do, Hans, but the delta might be 30 euros per megawatt hour or something. Yeah. So it's not a huge spread. Plus, we don't believe that normal end consumer wants a dynamic tariff. I don't think people want this uncertainty, not knowing what the energy bill will be. So, and where we see the interesting volatility is actually in the continuous intraday market and partially in the balancing market, but a lot at the moment in the continuous intraday market. And that's what we're doing with our system. We're trading in the continuous intraday market, where A, the volatility is higher, and B, the forecast is updating every 15 minutes. So you can do a lot of empty trades until the final delivery, which is great for value creation for such a system that's fast reacting. And I think the reason why not a lot of other companies in Germany have done this is because you really need to control the entire chain of command very well, from the algo trading over the aggregation platform to your network, to also the smart meter infrastructure and so on. So it's quite complicated to build the full chain. And that's what we're doing. We have our first virtual power plant operational since 3 weeks, I think, with about 1,000 customers. And we think we can ramp this up to somewhere between 50 and 100,000 customers by end of next year.
That's very impressive and ambitious. So just to understand this right, so rather than telling customers, hey, here's a dynamic electricity tariff, and you can charge your own EV according to it and pick the cheapest hours. Yeah. You are telling customers, give us your flexibility, let us play with it, and through that. And co-optimizing that with all the other flexibility sources we're aggregating, we can offer you a cheaper rate than you could realize yourself because we're doing all this financial trading, but you have to give up a certain degree of autonomy for that.
That's 100% right. That's 100% right. And it sounds a bit counterintuitive because, one would say, hey, but how do you ensure that the customer is not consuming the electricity when it's expensive? That's true, but again, we're not talking about fridges and lamps here, right? We're talking about heat pumps, EV charger, and battery and PV system. Those are the 4 things that are really interesting. So I need the consent that I can use the battery. I need the consent that the charger or the car is set in a certain charge mode, right? Our preferred charge mode is tell us how full it's supposed to be in the morning, and we take care of it. And I need the consent that I have some flexibility around the heat pump. That's a little bit a special topic. I think that's still early days. But if I have that consent, I have everything I need to leverage most of the flexibility and the power generation in the house. And what I can give in return is I can give the customer an extremely low flat electricity tariff. And I can give him, in addition, a monthly payout. So that's how we structure it. We say, hey, you get a low electricity tariff. You'll always be better off with this electricity tariff than whatever you find on Verivox. Plus, depending on how the trading went and depending on how you behaved, you get some cash back at the end of the month. A little bit like a Trade Republic savings account.
Super interesting. Verivox for international listeners, that's a German price comparison platform, which not everyone may be familiar with. I love the idea. The question that comes to mind is, why do you even need solar for that? Of course, you started out as a solar company, but you probably could build that case just on the basis of batteries, like similar to what base power is doing in the US now.
Yeah, I think we will see cases probably late 2025, 2026, where battery and a charger is enough. It's true. I mean, the flexibility is mainly in the battery and the charger, and not the solar itself. So that's 100% true. I think the way the German regulation works, there's still a lot of value in self-consumption, and we see that we can actually also bring the customers out of the subsidy regime with this virtual power plant, right? So we can actually, by shifting the time the PV is loading the energy into the grid, we can actually make more money than under the subsidy regime. But yeah, long story short, I do think there will be a world where customers, in particular with small roofs, just install a large battery.
Very interesting. Thank you. I want to touch on that bit about the subsidies actually, and also and link that to something you said earlier that about solar. A lot of the time nowadays being part of the problem rather than the solution, especially rooftop solar. And that's not a German problem. That's a pan-European or even global problem, because rooftop solar is often incentivized and regulated in a very bad way. You've got feed-in tariffs that are unresponsive to conditions in the wholesale market. Plants feeding in despite the fact that wholesale prices are negative. You've got plants that can't be curtailed, even if the local distribution grid cannot take the electricity anymore, and so forth. And there's a big discussion underway in various countries about how the incentive schemes for rooftop solar can be reformed to make it more system friendly. How would you do that, or could we even do without subsidies?
So the reality is, when our customers switch into the virtual power plant, they are leaving the subsidy regime, right? You cannot get a fixed feed-in tariff while being in our virtual power plant, because in Germany, under German regulation, you're not allowed to charge the battery from the grid while receiving the feed-in tariff. So we are taking customers out of the fixed feed-in tariff into what in Germany is called the sonstige Direktvermarktung, which is just another word for direct marketing, pure market-based direct marketing. So we're doing this already, and we need to prove that it's worth more than staying in the subsidy regime. I think the most important part is, what signals do you want the renewables to react to? Yeah, because in Germany we have the day-ahead price signal, we have the continuous intraday price signal. All of these are national signals. At least the day-ahead signal is a national signal, but the continuous intraday is, I think, per Regelzone. I'm not 100% sure. We do not have in Germany a signal for any sort of local grid congestions. Yeah, the regulation has done a first step in this direction by introducing variable grid fees from next year on. But I think it's great. I think it's a first step in the right direction, but it's quite funny, right? I think it reads more like a regulation from the 80s or 90s, because what it says is, please, 900 grid operators, you all separately now do a guess for the full next year when your grid is under stress, right? Nowadays, you would think, hey, please, let's have a data platform where we can see the next day when your grid is under stress, and let's please coordinate this between the 900 grid operators. So it's really sort of 2 steps ahead and 1 step back, as you say in German. But I think this is what we need, right? We need the right price signals, and then our virtual power plant also on a super local basis can react to all of this.
Great, thanks. Well, let's hope a couple of regulators and politicians are listening, because I think that's exactly the direction in which the market needs to go. The second deep dive I'd like to make is into your financing solutions, because that's, at least in my impression, that's really the original area where you as Enpal drove a lot of innovation over the past years. Just to start us off, can you describe to us the financing solutions that you offer to your customers?
Yes. So Enpal started off 8 years ago, I think, as a company who was selling solar systems. So we started off without a financing solution. And then we realized, okay, it's very hard to sell a 20,000, maybe even more euro system over the internet to customers who have little experience with it. So this resulted in 2019 in the launch of a leasing model. And the heading, or the idea in the leasing model is, let's take all the reasons away for the customers to switch to solar. So we said, you do not have to invest a single euro on day one. You're not responsible for any damages. Yeah, so we repair it for 20 years. We make sure that it's running for 20 years. Yeah, we insure it for 20 years. You don't even have to go to your bank and sign a loan. It's just one leasing contract with us. Yeah. And this was the original financing product solution that we scaled between 2019 and 2023. This was hugely successful because there was one or two other companies who were trying something similar. But besides that, the market was mainly a buying market. And some people had still some volume left in their house credit, right, when they were building a new house or doing renovations, and others were running to a local bank. But it's quite a cumbersome process to get a loan from a bank for a solar system. Yeah, so I think this was the real big innovation that we brought to the market back then. And in 2023, we upgraded this with a second financing solution, which is our loan solution. This is in the end a consumer loan, which has the advantage of being more flexible. Yeah, it can run up to 25 years, but it can be paid back at any time without penalties. You legally own the system on day one, unlike the leasing model, but you have more risks around damages, repairs, and so on yourself, which you can get rid of with a service contract if you want to. Yeah, so we have a leasing and a loan model, and we also have a buying solution, but it's interesting, really just 5, 6, 8% maybe of customers buy the system. Most of them use loan or lease.
Okay. Very interesting. And of course, that's only the customer facing part. What I find really interesting, what then happens in the backbone. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's super interesting. Again, maybe starting at the beginning, the very early lease facilities were financed partially by Mario himself because no one knew this asset class and no one wanted to finance them. Yeah, we found some local Sparkasse, a municipal bank.
Savings bank.
Yeah, savings bank, plus some of the money of Mario himself went into these first facilities. Yeah. And so we had to build a reputation. We had to build a data series on what's the payment behavior, what's the damage behavior, how many reserves you need, and so on and so on. And as it grew, you're growing also in the class of investors who want to invest in it. So we went from a very small local bank who thought it was a funny thing to try out to more like larger players like ING, to then more infrastructure-like investors who invest in these vehicles. And I think the really big breakthrough, or a couple of really big breakthroughs, happened this year, where we, for the first time, bundled part of our loan facilities together and brought them public as a solar asset-backed security. And that was the first solar asset-backed security in Europe, as far as I know. And it's a huge step towards professionalizing this whole financing structure and therefore making it cheaper. And in the end, the financing cost is fundamental driver for customers' decisions in solar.
Again, very impressive. And maybe can you talk a little bit about the difficulties or the challenges you had to overcome when building these? I mean, just as a layperson, I would imagine that such a leasing solution can be challenging if people move like 10 years into their lease. Like, how do you deal with these operational difficulties, or were they even the biggest challenges, or was it something else much more difficult?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's interesting that you say that, but I think the question that I've asked myself often is, okay, why isn't there a large company in Europe who just offers a very good leasing solution for solar and heat pumps and so on? And there are some smaller companies if you look for them, but there's no large successful company. And I think one of the real challenges is if you give a loan to a private person that buys then a solar system from a local installer, what happens if the local installer left a hole in your roof? What happens if the local installer, I don't know, forgot to pick up his garbage? What if the local installer whatever destroyed your lawn, right? Completely annoying but normal things in the installer world that you need to take care of. But the reality is the loan in a normal legal setup is completely independent from what the installer does. So the consumer has the feeling he should stop paying his loan because there's some damage or something, right? But the company who gave you the loan said, no, legally it's completely independent. You have to pay me and you have to figure out with your installer what went wrong. And this triangle can make it extremely difficult to manage your default rate, because you might have very high default rates the first couple of months and have very unpleasant customer experience. We as one company have all of it under one roof. So if we see a customer not paying because he said we did something to his house or whatever, we can fast lane this to our installer and say, okay, you need to drive out there tomorrow, you need to fix it, and then we collect the money. So there's as you said, there's huge operational challenges around making sure the quality is right, making sure that the finance processes of billing, collecting money are right, making sure that escalations are working, but also in a customer-friendly way. And that's part of our daily operations. I think that's how we were able to scale it and why a pure financing company is struggling to make it happen.
Makes sense. Thank you very much for coming on the pod, Benny. It's been really insightful.
Thanks, Hans.
That was Benjamin Merle, Chief Product Officer of Enpal, talking to Hans Koenig, Aurora's Managing Director for Central Europe. Thanks for listening to Energy Unplugged. Do keep an eye on our podcast feed for more in-depth conversations with senior members of the energy industry. The best way to do this is to follow or subscribe to the podcast via whatever platform you use.